Alright everyone, so we're jumping straight into the heart of this story, the brutal reality of being sold into slavery and the gladiator pits. It's a grim scene, no doubt, but it's crucial to understand the depth of Marcus's despair and the overwhelming odds stacked against him before we can appreciate the incredible journey he's about to embark on. Marcus, our protagonist, was a farmer, a simple man. He tilled the land, knew the rhythm of the seasons, and found contentment in honest work. He wasn't born into wealth or privilege, but he had his family, his small patch of land, and a sense of belonging, all that shattered in a single, devastating raid. Bandits, likely mercenaries driven by greed and desperation, swept through his village. They killed, they pillaged, and they enslaved. Marcus, along with several others, was deemed strong enough for sale and dragged away, leaving behind a life he could scarcely imagine losing. Imagine the sheer terror, the gut-wrenching helplessness. One moment you're harvesting crops, the next you're chained, gagged, and thrown into the back of a wagon, heading towards an unknown, undoubtedly horrific, future. The bandits cared for them as if they were cargo, nothing more. They beat them when they resisted, starved them to keep them docile, and treated them with the casual cruelty that comes with absolute power. This initial experience broke many, but in Marcus, it ignited a quiet, simmering rage. He wasn't a born fighter, but he was stubborn, resilient, and fiercely protective of those around him, even in this dire situation.
After a grueling journey, filled with hardship and the constant threat of death, they arrived at the auction block. This wasn't a marketplace for goods. It was a marketplace for human flesh, for strength, for potential profits. The air hung thick with the stench of sweat, fear, and desperation. Marcus saw men and women, stripped bare and prodded like livestock, their eyes vacant, their spirits broken. Slave traders, each more callous than the last, barked their offers, highlighting the perceived strengths of each individual. Look at the muscles on this one. Bred for labor, a strong back, ideal for mining. Marcus, despite his disheveled appearance and obvious trauma, caught the eye of a particularly ruthless lanista, a gladiator trainer. This man, known as Valerius, was a shrewd judge of potential, and he saw something in Marcus's build, his unwavering gaze, and the almost palpable aura of defiance that clung to him. Valerius didn't see a broken farmer, he saw a raw diamond, a potential champion. He cared little for Marcus's humanity, only for the profit he could generate in the arena. So, Marcus was bought, marked with the branding iron of Valerius's Ludus gladiator skull, and thrust into the brutal world of gladiatorial combat. The Ludus was a living hell. Picture a sprawling compound, surrounded by high walls and guarded by armed sentinels. Inside, gladiators were crammed into cramped cells, barely enough room to stand. The days were filled with grueling training, designed to break them down physically and mentally. They were forced to endure relentless drills, swinging heavy wooden swords, sparring with hardened veterans, and enduring the constant threat of injury. Food was scarce and tasteless, just enough to keep them alive and functioning. Sleep was fitful, punctuated by nightmares and the cries of the injured. The lanista and his trainers ruled with an iron fist, using fear and violence to maintain control. Any sign of insubordination was met with swift and brutal punishment. Marcus was initially overwhelmed. He was used to working the land, not wielding a gladius. He was clumsy, slow, and constantly made mistakes. He suffered beatings, ridicule, and the crushing weight of despair. He saw other gladiators, men who had once been strong and proud, reduced to broken shells, their spirits extinguished. He witnessed the brutal reality of the arena, the bloody deaths, the cheering crowds, the cold indifference of the wealthy elite. He even contemplated giving up. What was the point of fighting? He was a slave, a pawn in someone else's game. Escape seemed impossible, freedom a distant dream. But then, something changed. He observed. He watched the other gladiators, the veterans who had survived countless battles. He studied their techniques, their footwork, their weapon handling. He noticed the subtle cues, the tells that revealed their intentions. He learned to anticipate their moves, to exploit their weaknesses. One of those veterans was a woman named Aurelia. Aurelia wasn't a typical gladiator. She was older, scarred, and possessed a quiet dignity that set her apart. She was also exceptionally skilled, a master of both the gladius and the net and trident. She had seen it all in the arena, the glory and the horror. Now, Aurelia wasn't supposed to interact with the new recruits. She was a seasoned fighter, preparing for her own battles, but she saw something in Marcus, a flicker of defiance in his eyes, a spark of potential that others had overlooked. She saw a man who was not yet broken, a man who still held onto a sliver of hope. So, under the cloak of darkness, during the brief moments when the guards relaxed or distracted, Aurelia began to train Marcus. She couldn't offer him freedom, but she could offer him the skills he needed to survive, to become stronger, to potentially even find a way to rebel. These secret training sessions were fraught with danger. If they were caught, the consequences would be severe for both of them. But Aurelia was willing to take the risk. She had her own reasons, her own past filled with pain and injustice. She saw in Marcus a chance to strike back, to challenge the system that had enslaved them all. Her training wasn't just about swords and shields. She taught him discipline, focus, and the importance of controlling his emotions. She explained the strategies of combat, how to use his strengths and exploit his opponent's weaknesses. She taught him the importance of teamwork, of building alliances with other gladiators.
She started with the basics: footwork, stance, and basic strikes. Imagine you're planting your feet deep into the earth, she'd say, rooted like a tree. Your balance is your strength. She'd make him practice these movements repeatedly until they became second nature. Then, she'd move on to more complex techniques, teaching him how to parry blows, how to dodge attacks, and how to counter with deadly precision. Don't just react, she'd instruct. Anticipate. Read your opponent's movements. See the opening before it appears. She would throw mock attacks at him, forcing him to react quickly and decisively. She pushed him hard, demanding perfection, knowing that his life depended on it. But most importantly, Aurelia instilled in Marcus a sense of purpose. She reminded him that he was not just a slave, a piece of property. He was a man, with his own thoughts, his own feelings, and his own right to fight for his freedom. They may own your body, she'd say, but they cannot own your spirit. That is yours to protect. These secret training sessions became Marcus's lifeline. They gave him hope in a hopeless situation. They transformed him from a broken farmer into a determined fighter. And they planted the seeds of a rebellion that would one day shake the foundations of the arena. This is just the beginning. The transformation is slow, painful, but absolutely necessary. The gladiator pits will not be the end of his story, but merely the beginning of his fight for freedom.